What's up, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Scyushi, and we are back in some more Genshin Impact. And today we can finally talk about Ayato, Ayaka's brother, because of the fact that the official Genshin livestream has talked about Ayato, which means that now I am allowed to talk about it, because leaks, although they've already been on YouTube, is technically against Genshin terms of service, and, you know, I'm a good little boy. So, for those of you that just want the information, here's the card for all of the Ascension materials. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can just download that and move on if you want, but otherwise we are going to end up getting into Ayato's different abilities, how he functions, and talk about a couple possible builds when he ends up coming out. So Ayato is going to end up releasing March 29th at 8 p.m. Pacific time, and alongside his banner we're also going to end up having Venti, and then 3 weeks after, which would be April 19th, there's going to be Ayaka's banner rerun all on her own. I guess they're not confident in Ayato selling on his own confidence, and so they're trying to have a Venti rerun at the same time, which is also going to end up having a new weapon banner for a Venti bow alongside Ayato having his own new sword. But anyways, let's get into it. So Ayato is going to end up being a 5-star Hydro sword user. Initially we ended up thinking he would have been a great sword user, but that is not the case. He is going to end up being a single-handed sword user, and his abilities are going to end up being pretty cool. So his elemental skill is going to be Kamisato Art Kyoka, which Kamisato Ayako shifts position and enters the Takimiguri Kanka state. After this shift, he will leave a watery illusion at his original location. I think basically it's saying if an opponent ends up getting in contact with the watery illusion, it explodes, but will also end up exploding after its duration ends, and that's going to end up dealing area of effect hydro damage, but most of all it's just going to end up inducting the hydro effect, so it's going to end up having all of the enemies surrounding it become wet, which means that you can then end up using the synergies of other abilities. So there's also the state that Ayato ends up getting in once he ends up using his E ability. So in this state, Ayato uses his Shunsuiken. I'm butchering it, I don't care. He basically has a cool ninja slash, so it's going to be blinding fast attacks, which causes damage from his normal attacks to be converted into area of effect hydro damage. This cannot be overridden. It also has the following properties. After a Shunsuiken attack hits an opponent, which is the water ninja slash, it grants Ayato the Namisen effect, which increases the damage dealt by the water slash based on Ayato's current max HP. The initial maximum number of Namisen stacks is 4, and 1 stack can be gained through his water slash every 0.1 seconds. This effect will be dispelled when the Takimiguri Kanka ends, which is going to end up being the explosion of the water thing. So it doesn't really last very long as the thing. It's kind of a plop your E out, burst attack as quick as possible, right? Kamisato Ayato will also have resistance to interruption increased. You're unable to use charged or plunging attacks, and then when he's the effect will also end up being cleared if Ayato ends up leaving the field. And then there's going to end up being his ultimate ability, Soyu, which unveils a garden of purity that extinguishes all cacophony within. Basically, it's going to end up having bloom water blades constantly rain down and attack opponents with its area of effect, dealing hydro damage and increasing the normal attack damage of characters within. So essentially, it's going to end up being a Ganyu ult, but it's hydro instead of ice. And then on top of that, on top of tagging the enemies and stuff, it's also going to end up, as I said, increasing your normal attack damage with every character. So anyways, let's move on to the next, which is going to end up being the passive talents of Ayato. Sorry, I keep pausing so I can scroll down on the page. But the passive talents, so when Ayato cooks a dish perfectly, he has an 18% chance to receive an additional suspicious dish of the same type. Also, his next passive is Kamisato Art Mine Wo Matoishi Kiyotaki, which basically makes it so that his Kamisato Art Kyoka, which is his E ability, after it is used, Kamisato Ayato will gain 2 Namisen stacks, and when the watery illusion explodes, Ayato will gain a Namisen effect equal to the maximum number of stacks possible. So I don't even know why that's his passive. Basically, it just means, once again, you would use his E, and that's going to be the bulk of his damage, whereas his ultimate is going to end up being being more so a utility ability, which, speaking of which, his other passive ability makes it so that if Ayato is not on the field and his energy is less than 40, he will regenerate 2 energy for himself every 1 second, which is actually pretty crazy when you think about it. Like that right there. Like, Ayato's passives are pretty crazy because those are essentially the same as certain characters' constellations. So, yeah. Anyway, speaking of constellations. So, at Constellation 1, or C1, the Shunsuiken damage, which is going to end up being the Water Slash, is increased by 40% against opponents with 50% HP or less. Kind of similar to Diluc way back in the day when he's using the Wolf Greatsword. It's just kind of a nice little throwback where it's going to end up making him deal a lot more damage, basically. So his C2 makes it so that Nami-sen's maximum stack count is increased to 5, and when Kamisato Ayato has at least 3 Nami-sen stacks, his max HP is increased by 50%. Keeping in mind that his other ability ends up scaling off of his HP. Sorry, to clarify, by other ability I meant the Water Slash itself will end up dealing more damage based on the HP. So essentially that just makes his E ability way stronger. His C3, even though it shows the wrong image, like that's actually the image of his ultimate ability, but in fact it says that it increases his Kyoka ability by 3 levels, which is going to end up being his elemental skill, his E ability, his Water Slashes. His C4 makes it so that after using your ultimate ability, all nearby party members will have 15% increase in normal attack speed for 15 seconds, which could end up working not only on the entire party, but that also means that Ayato is going to end up benefiting from that as well. So if that could end up stacking with his Water Slashes, that means he could be doing some insane damage numbers. But of course, that's going to end up being much higher constellations. So his C5 makes it so that his Soyu, which is his ultimate ability, is increased by 3 levels. And his C6 is going to make it so that after using his E ability, Ayato's next Shunsuiken attack, which is the Water Slash, will create 2 extra strikes when they hit opponents, each dealing 300% of Ayato's attack as damage. Both of these attacks will not be affected by Nami-sen. Absolutely insane. That just ends up giving him a bunch of free damage. Like, good lord, dude. I kind of wish that I could get a C6 just because he's such a cool character and I really like his elemental skill ability, but I can't be bothered. It's just too expensive, you know? Now, for weapons that you could potentially end up using, Black Sword is going to end up being one of the best. Otherwise, you could potentially end up using the Black Cliff, which is going to end up being the one that you can end up buying out of the, cash shop every now and then for the Star Glitter. Mist Splitter Reforged is going to end up being a good one just because of the fact that it has the raw crit damage. It ultimately depends how you want to build him. The Elemental Mastery Sword could potentially be okay, but generally speaking, the best weapon is going to end up being Ayato's sword, which, funny enough, Ayato's sword is basically going to end up being the 5-star equivalent of the Black Sword, where it is going to end up having its main stat is, obviously attack, but its second stat is going to end up being crit rate. Once the sword is fully maxed out at level 90, the crit rate is going to be 33.1%, where the damage is going to be 608, which is absolutely nuts. The special effect of the the new sword is going to end up being obtain 12% all elemental damage bonus, which actually means that this sword could be used on a lot of different characters, not just specifically a Hydro character. But anyways, moving on. When other nearby party members use elemental skills, the character equipping this weapon will gain 1 wave spike stack. Max 2 stacks. This effect can be triggered once every 0.3 seconds. When the character equipping this weapon uses an elemental skill, all stacks of the wave spike will be consumed to gain rippling upheaval, which makes it so that each stack of wave spike consumed will increase normal attack damage by 20% for 8 seconds, meaning that you could get 40% extra damage when you end up having both stacks. Now, that said, I personally am just going to end up using the Black Sword because it essentially is going to end up being the same thing, but you don't have to worry about building up any stacks, as you can see, at least if you have it at Refinement 5. So you can work on that if you want. But generally speaking, I'm not too concerned about the 5-star sword, even though it's going to end up looking really cool on the character. Now, for artifacts, this is where you're going to end up kind of having a mixed mash of certain things. Generally speaking, I'd say that for right now, if you want to build for him, you're going to be going for the 4-piece Hydro set, as you can see that I have. But there is going to end up being a bunch of new artifact sets that we'll get into momentarily. Generally speaking, again, you're looking for, you know, attack, crit rate, crit damage, so on and so forth. You can see I've actually got some pretty nice artifacts, generally speaking. I'd recommend going for HP on the sands, and then for the goblet, you obviously want to have the hydro damage, and then for the hat, crit rate, crit damage, depending. Maybe it'll, you know, time will tell. Maybe he'll end up really showing his true colors with having more HP, but generally speaking, the 2-piece set is going to give you increased hydro damage, and then the 4 pieces after using elemental skill, normal attack and charged attack damage is increased by 30% for 15 seconds, which once again is just going to end up being an absolute cluster of how much damage he can end up potentially doing. So there's going to end up being 2 new artifact sets, but we're going to be talking about the one that specifically works with Ayato rather than the other set, because the other new set that is going to be added to the game is essentially going to end up being a set for Xiao, because it basically is going to make it so that when you end up using your burst, you get a damage boost, and then so long as your HP takes damage, you'll end up getting even more of a damage boost. And Xiao's ultimate ability makes it so that he drains his HP when he's using his ult. But anyways, the Echoes of an Offering, I think is what the set is called. So the effect is going to be the 2-piece set is 18% attack per, and then the 4-piece set is when normal attacks hit opponents, there is a 36% chance that it will trigger Valley Right, which will increase normal attack damage by 70% of your attack. So if you essentially ended up building towards this artifact stat, you might want to risk just going all in on your attack percentage, or just raw attack, rather than, focusing on the crit damage and crit rate. It ultimately, again, depends on how you want to end up building him, essentially. But anyways, moving on. If a normal attack fails to trigger Valley Right, the odds of it triggering the next time will increase by 20%, and the trigger can occur once every 0.2 seconds. And then, of course, there's the Constellations, and last but not least, how would you end up leveling up his talents? So I would probably prioritize his E ability first and foremost, just because that's going to be where the bulk of his damage is. Generally speaking, if you're using him as a DPS character, I'd say you're going to be focusing on his E and his normal attack, and then lastly his ult. But again, if you want to end up using him as more of a support character, then maybe you want to end up just building up his ultimate, just because it's going to end up boosting the attack damage of everybody, not only just Ayato, which of course means that his ultimate is going to end up having value as well. Anyways, that's gonna do it, ladies and gentlemen. So hopefully you ended up finding this video helpful. Really looking forward to Ayato, and more so specifically the Canyon. I'm definitely gonna be pulling for Ayato, but I'm just using my Freema gems. I don't really want to wail on any other characters in the game, just because, frankly speaking, it's just, I don't know, it's just, I've spent too much money on this game. But those of you that are waiting for Ayato, save up your Freema gems. Good luck, and hopefully you ended up enjoying today's video. Smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want, support the channel, and have a great day, everybody.